How do you deal with all those injuries at running back, including the 49ers, Rams, and Lions? And who should you play at quarterback with 6 teams on a bye in week 7? We have the answers, and we look at the waiver wire only on Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL betting and fantasy for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
All right, Michelle, we are looking at the waiver wire ahead of week 7. We'll get into that. Big bye week, 6 teams off. We had some major injuries come down here, especially at running back. We're still waiting word on Christian McCaffrey to see his availability for this week, but we know Dave Montgomery's out here. We know 2 Rams running backs are not going to play here in week 7. So a lot of available players here as you're battling through attrition on your team. We'll get into those picks, prioritize where you want to target. We also look at some streaming options at quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, and defense. We'll do that all in today's show. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We're your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. Now, Michelle, we will get into the running backs here right away because that's what everyone wants to know. What do you do with these injuries? And McCaffrey, we're still waiting word, but we got to figure out between 2 running backs there, potentially 2 running backs in the Rams situation, and then maybe a guy coming back to help us from the Bears this week.
Yeah, I think the McCaffrey one is obviously the biggest piece to keep an eye on here because if Christian McCaffrey has to miss time, that is a huge workload that one of these guys are going to take over. Now, maybe it's a split. Maybe they don't give all the work that Christian McCaffrey has seen to one guy. Most likely not, right? But McCaffrey has made up 32% of the 49ers scrimmage yards this season. It's the second most in the NFL, most among running backs, among all players. So one of these guys is going to get a nice chunk of usage. Elijah Mitchell has had trouble staying healthy. I do think he's the better running back, more explosive running back, higher upside of the 2. But Jordan Mason will probably get those, shorter yardage carries, goal line carries. I do think it's concerning that we're sitting, middle of the day on Tuesday and we still don't have an update on Christian McCaffrey's MRI. Like, how is that possible?
Well, I think the biggest thing is they're waiting to see potentially, is it that tweener injury, that 2 to 4 week injury where, okay, they've got a bye coming up in a couple weeks after 2 more games. So they can say, okay, we can give them a whole month off if we do this. So that's something to consider. They got to weigh this matchup. They also know they're playing on Monday night, which is also not great for fantasy managers having to wait this out if he looks like he could be a game time decision. Same thing goes for Deebo Samuel here. But when you look at Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell, the one thing I looked at there when examining their values is that they don't really throw too much to a back that is not Christian McCaffrey, right? It goes pretty much down to Kyle Juszczyk out of the backfield when McCaffrey has not been available, right? They don't really force giving the ball to the running back in the passing game. So that's one thing that you're going to lose the value from with these running backs. So you have to almost be certain that they're going to have a good rushing game. And we've seen that with another player in the Rams situation, very similar with Kyren Williams, where they don't really force throw to the back unless they really need to. And also the 49ers are not trailing all that much, and they're not in position where they're having to check down and get some cheap hurry up points that way. So that's one thing. I think Jordan Mason and Elijah Mitchell pretty even. Mason did play ahead of Mitchell quite a bit, but Mitchell was just coming back from an knee injury. You also have Tyrion Davis-Price. So it can get a little bit ugly, but right now I would say Mason, the momentum is towards him a little bit over Mitchell. Again, Mitchell just can't stay on the field. He's a little older guy, and I think Mason has been explosive at times. I mean, he scored those long touchdowns and some mop-up duties. So something to watch out there. Now, we talked about Kyren Williams. Well, he is going to miss time. They were pretty nonchalant that he was okay, but then it looks like he's going to miss at least 1 game this week against Michelle's Steelers. They're at home this week. And Ronnie Rivers, the guy that was coming in behind him, he looks like he could be out for much longer with a knee injury. So that leaves the rookie, Zach Evans. They also have Royce Freeman on the practice squad. I joked about Leonard Fournette, but Leonard Fournette is getting a look from the Bills here. So I don't know how you're going to look at this, except I think you have to maybe look at Zach Evans being the rookie with some upside.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see the report that Kyren Williams was going to be out this week. Did I miss that?
Well, it looks that way at this point. I mean,
Okay.
they're
He has a
not very
sprained
optimistic.
ankle. Yeah, we'll see if he
Yeah,
can go. If he can't, then I think next man up is Zach Evans. But don't forget, I mean, we all thought Amari DeMarcardo was the next man
yeah,
up with the Cardinals, and then they got Damian Williams off their practice squad, and he has the veteran experience. So maybe you see that with Royce Freeman this week, or
yeah,
maybe they sign another veteran running back. But next up, who should it be is Evans. So if you're desperate, like literally desperate for a running back, you can play him because the Steelers are allowing a ton of rushing yards this season. I think fourth most in the league. So you definitely want to play a running back against the Steelers. It's just figuring out which running back it would be for the Rams. And unfortunately, that's not super clear. But my best guess at this exact moment on Tuesday would be Zach Evans.
yeah. So there's a couple options there. Now, if you're hurting a little bit, potentially without McCaffrey this week, and maybe the Rams running backs are scrambled here, and David Montgomery is also on the shelf, I think you can look a little bit differently away from the Lions at first for your value. We'll get into Craig Reynolds in our next segment here, but two guys, Roshan Johnson, people might have gone off him with a concussion last week. He should return, and usually not a long-term injury there, so should return. It's a very good matchup this week against the Raiders, and we know that Donta Foreman did not look all that great there in last week's game against the Vikings. So Roshan could be up and running here. And again, concussion means linear injury. He can be back out there. And Kareem Hunt getting some key touches. It is a pretty decent spot against the Colts this week. They're giving up more fantasy points to running backs of late. We saw what Travis Etienne did against them last week. So not a bad spot there if Hunt is getting a little bit more usage in relation to Jerome Ford.
Yeah, I think Roshan Johnson, just check your waivers for him, see if he was dropped, like you said, during the time he missed with a concussion. But I do expect him to be the lead back for the Bears and a nice matchup. Kareem Hunt, it was nice to see him get some work. You wonder if that's going to keep increasing here. Jerome Ford did have a pretty solid game against a really tough 49ers defense. So luckily now Ford is looking like a guy that you can play with a little bit of confidence, but also Kareem Hunt is one of those dart throw plays that he's a talented running back, right? He has a veteran
Yeah.
experience. He can always sneak into the end zone. I will say though, there's wide receivers this week that I would rather take that, long shot on in good
Mm-hmm.
matchups than try to, roll with one of the like a Kareem Hunt or Zach Evans or something like that, where it just seems a lot riskier with not knowing the workload.
Yeah, I think you have to consider what do you need? Do you need a flex? Are you desperate for an RB2? That's what you have to go with. But don't force in a running back like that into your flex if you don't need to. And we've talked about these rookies quite a bit. This may be the last call to get them. Josh Downs, especially for the Colts, he looks like he's locked in with Gardner Minshew. Minshew could end up being the starter the rest of the way here, with Anthony Richardson reports not sounding good about his shoulder, maybe being shut down here. So Josh Downs in a good position. Rasheed Rice, another rookie that seems to have slightly expanded role every week with the Chiefs and could do something. And Wan'Dale Robinson, I consider him more like a rookie because he's in his second year out of Kentucky and hasn't done a lot. The Giants' passing game has kind of disappeared. So these are three options for you as well that you could maybe plug and play here. Decent matchups across the board. Downs has a little trickier against the Browns, but I think Robinson against Commanders, Rice versus the Chargers definitely should have some streaming appeal.
Yeah, it's not going to feel good plugging in Josh Downs against the Browns defense. So if you
Yeah.
need someone for this week that has high upside, I do think that's Wan'Dale Robinson. He is a great pickup this week if you need a 1 week guy that has really high upside. And it's not to say he's going to be pointless after that, but I think this particular week in this matchup against the Commanders, he could have a huge game. I mean, he had 8 targets, 62 yards last week. So in PPR, he put together a nice game for you. We see his snaps have gone way up over the last couple of weeks. And again, we brought this up when Drake London was going to face the Commanders last week. The Commanders are just giving up 100-yard games to wide receivers week after week after week after week. It's each of their last 5 games they've allowed at least one wide receiver to hit 100 receiving yards in a game. And if I have to take a bet on one of these Giants wide receivers to do it, it's going to be Wan'Dale Robinson. Rashee Rice, I'm just like waiting for that breakout game. He did have a career high 72 yards because he had that nice long break off run, run after the catch in week 6. I'm waiting for it, but it's I'd rather start Rashee Rice than Josh Downs, despite Josh Downs getting the more consistent usage. But the matchup against the Chargers, I feel much better about than the matchup against the Browns.
Yeah, I think that's how you would go for this week. I still think Downs is rosterable here because of his role here going forward with Gardner Minshew. Alec Pierce also hurt for the Colts. It's pretty much down to him and Michael Pittman as the valuable wide receivers in Indianapolis. Now, streaming quarterbacks this week, if they're guys that we liked early as just being season-long potential streamers in the right matchup. So they light up once again nicely. I played Sam Howell a couple weeks ago. It paid off well against the Bears when Justin Herbert was off. If you have another quarterback who's off this week, Sam Howell, great matchup against the Giants. Another Giants defense kind of befuddled Josh Allen for a while, which was a little bit mysterious. So the same thing with the Broncos, who get Jordan Love. They did well against Patrick Mahomes, but don't follow and look at those trends. Just look at this matchup individually here. I think Sam Howell, Jordan Love, they're both on the road and makes you a little bit nervous. They're both inconsistent, can be sloppy with turnovers, but I just think the Giants and Broncos have enough defensive holes where these two quarterbacks can exploit and give you potentially top 12 rewards on a big bye week.
Yeah, I mean, since week 2 for Sam Howell, it's 21 points, 20 points, 25 points, 18 points, and this isn't a 4-point pass touchdown format. He only had that really one. I mean, couldn't have gotten worse against the Bills, where he scored 0.6 points. But just throw away that game, and he's been a very, very solid fantasy quarterback. So you definitely can pick him up and play him this week if you need to. And I do think there's probably Jordan Love sitting there on some waivers after his horrific week 5 week. Like, that was really bad. And then he had a week 6 bye. There's a good chance people had to drop him, move on from him. And if you need a quarterback this week, really great matchup against the Broncos. So those are 2 good options for you at quarterback. And then if you need a tight end option this week that could be on waivers is rookie tight end Luke Musgrave for the Packers in that same matchup, obviously, with his quarterback, Jordan Love. So against the Broncos, who are allowing a lot of points to tight ends. Week 4, they allowed 28 points to Cole Kmet. Last week, they allowed 21 points to Travis Kelce. Even in week 5, they allowed 11 points to Tyler Conklin. So I think Luke Musgrave's a high upside play this week if you need a 1-week tight end.
Yeah, that's a good call on that rookie. I do have another rookie that I want to mention at tight end that we'll get into in our next group of waiver wire targets here to look at. These are the highest priorities we just talked about. There are some other players, however, that you should keep your eye on. Everyone should be working on the waiver wire, not just the desperate players and players looking for starters or backup help. Everybody should always be scouting the waiver wire. We'll give you some options there if you can get into the stash position here in our next segment. First, we got to hear from a couple of our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by BetterHelp, and BetterHelp is therapy online that is going to help you with a lot of things to get you through life, of be that roadmap that you need, because we can all get lost a little bit here. And if you haven't given therapy a try, it's really helpful. I go to one regularly, and it's just a great experience. I can talk out the things that are on my mind and just to get a little bit of feeling on how to get help and work through those things every day. And therapy is maybe a little intimidating for some of you, but really, you get into it, you find that person that you're comfortable sharing with, and you're changing your life just like that. So I can't stress enough how important therapy is. And with BetterHelp, you can give it a try in the online version. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if it's not a good fit, you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So you can get the right person talking to you to get you on the right track. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today, and you'll get a 10% off your first month. That's, again, check it out there on the screen. That's the code for BetterHelp. That's Locked On, and you'll get 10% off there at BetterHelp with your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp.com/locked on. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by DoorDash. And really, we're watching games on Sunday. Sometimes we don't want to be disturbed, and it's just going nuts here. We're watching the red zone. If you're a fantasy player, and you just keep watching these games, and some are going deep in the fourth quarter, some are going to overtime. You just can't leave. But that's where DoorDash is there to help you. You need to get your game day favorites delivered to you right in that afternoon window when you're getting hungry. It's perfect time around 4:25 Eastern. You can order pizza, wings, burgers, or even just anything simple, dessert, and you'll get it from DoorDash, all delivered to you without missing any part of the game. Anything you're looking for, grocery delivery is also available at DoorDash. So anything you want, you can think of there to replenish yourself during a long Sunday of football watching. DoorDash is going to help you do just that. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend 15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app and enter the promo code LOCKED23, that's going to subject to change and terms to apply, but that's 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Just download the DoorDash app, enter the promo code LOCKED23. That's locked, all caps, 23. Check it out. Don't forget to use the promo code LOCK23, 50% off, up to $10 value on your first order. Check it out. The DoorDash app is there. Just spend 15 or more to take advantage of that now. All right, Michelle, let's continue the show and look at our next tier of running backs. I'll start with this guy, Craig Reynolds. It wasn't all that great when we saw him take over against the Buccaneers, but this was a tough matchup. The Buccaneers with Vita Vea are always a tough run defense. This week, they get the Ravens, but I think they might get Jahmyr Gibbs back this week. So it'll be an interesting split between Reynolds and Gibbs. We know Montgomery is at least going to miss this game, probably more than that. So again, Gibbs, this is a chance for maybe the Lions to get Gibbs going. I think, again, I don't expect a lot of rushing yards, so this could be an opportunity also to get Gibbs going in the passing game. They could use extra weapons. And keep in mind, they haven't had Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and Gibbs all on the field at the same time here for Jared Goff. So, look, I think you go after Reynolds, but just temper your expectations with Gibbs coming.
Yeah, and I think you only go after Craig Reynolds if you don't have a single other body to put into your running back 2 spot. Like, that's it. Against the like, yeah, he could even lead this team in carries and get 10 carries, but like that's all he's gonna get, and it's gonna be the carries. It's not going to be efficient, and it's gonna be for like no fantasy points. So Jahmyr Gibbs is gonna be the lead back if he's back, and that's the only one I would consider playing in this backfield, unless again I'm desperately desperate. I will say Jeff Wilson Jr. interests me a little bit if he's still out there. No Achane, he's still going to miss at least 3 more weeks. They get the Eagles this week, so not a great matchup, but we'll see if Jeff Wilson Jr. does come back. I mean, when he got traded to the Dolphins last year and it was Mostert and Jeff Wilson had a handful of really solid fantasy weeks. Like, he was a good fantasy producer, and I don't think they want Mostert taking all of the carries. Like, he's not a big back. He's had injury history. So I do think Jeff Wilson could get involved. He could steal a touchdown or 2. And so I would be looking to definitely roster Jeff Wilson Jr. over a guy like Craig Reynolds if those were my choices.
Yeah, and hopefully he can go this week. Chris Brooks, by the way, their third stringer, got hurt. Salvin Ahmed may have got the points that Wilson might have in that game cleaning up against the Panthers. So something to keep in mind. They will work in backs behind Mostert, and they did. And they just had a big enough lead, and Mostert makes it easy. If he runs for big plays, there's a less chance of him being in the game late, right? So he produced well. It is a tough matchup against the Eagles, but I feel like the Dolphins have the potential to run on anyone. So something to consider there with Wilson and his usage. And Tai Spears, he's on a bye. It might be a sneaky time to stash him. I think we're going to see some big changes coming up for the Titans pretty soon, and the season is starting to look lost. Ryan Tannehill's hurt again. Same injury, very similar to what he had last year. Spears could be more involved than Derrick Henry. You could see Traylon Burks coming back, maybe youth movement, Will Levis getting there potentially. So I think Spears, they're going to get a good long look at him at some point, and he's been already kind of explosive with his usage already with Derrick Henry.
Yeah, he's definitely just an insurance policy, but maybe a team wants to trade for Derrick Henry before the trade deadline, something super cheap. If Ryan Tannehill is going to miss time and they're losing a bunch of games, but if anything happened to Derrick Henry, then Tai Spears would be a top tier running back to have on your team. So I'm happy to pick him up, hold him. I don't want to play him, obviously. I mean, there was that nice game a couple weeks ago where he broke one off. Like there's moments where he has good plays, right? But the usage is not there yet to trust him in your lineups. But I'm more than happy to hold him onto my bench in case anything does happen to Derrick Henry. I think he's probably one of the best handcuffs you can roster right now.
Yeah, for sure, and he's getting just enough work in the pass game. He's kind of like those guys we've seen, Devin Achan, Brees Hall. Just he doesn't need a lot of touches to put up some yards, and we've seen that here in limited opportunities. So let's hope that continues. Now, Curtis Samuel, Michelle, is the Commander's best fantasy wide receiver. We have to kind of acknowledge that. It's really sad. We were really high in Jahan Dotson. He's faded. Terry McLaurin's had some nice games, but Samuel's just bringing it here. He's been very consistent. He's outscoring guys in similar roles, such as Chris Godwin and Tyler Lockett, guys that are working the slot. Like he's been a better fantasy asset than both those guys. So we've looked at the Adam Thielen's flash, but now Curtis Samuel, I think, really needs to be rostered in most leagues. He's just getting too much high leverage looks here from Sam Howell.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you play in a PPR league, he's scored 14 or more points in each of the last 3 weeks. So he is Sam Howell's go-to guy. And I know Ron Rivera said the targets are going to come for Jahan Dotson. I'll believe it when I see it with my own two eyes because they're not there right now. So Curtis Samuel is definitely a great pickup this week to play against the Giants. He's one of those guys that will give you safer points, and maybe they get Jahan Dotson more involved, and it hurts Curtis Samuel. But I'm willing to bet that it'll just be Curtis Samuel a game again. So I like that play. And then two younger guys here that are very, very risky. But I do think instead of taking a risk on some running back that is just going to get 3 to 6 points, like I'd rather just shoot my shot, swing for the home run with one of these guys. So Marvin Mims, it's someone I want to pick up. Again, I don't know if I have the balls to play him, all right, this week, but he is, but he gets the Packers, not the easiest matchup. But all this rumors around Jerry Jeudy could be traded, right? I think if Jerry Jeudy's to get traded, Marvin Mims would be a great guy to have on your fantasy team. So that's an option for pickup. And then 49ers rookie wide receiver Ronnie Bell. That would be for this week because they get the Vikings. Debo might have to miss time. We'll see. He has a shoulder sprain, right? If he plays, then obviously Ronnie Bell's no longer in it. But if CMC and Debo are out, it's going to leave a lot of targets for other people. It's a really nice matchup. We saw Ronnie Bell, a handful of weeks ago when Debo had to miss a game. He put up some good plays, right? He had a good game. So I think Ronnie Bell's a sneaky option here too in week 7.
Yeah, I like that call. I mean, I've been trying to find one of these guys. It hasn't quite worked out, like the Trey Palmer type. I'm like, okay, this is great if this person misses the game. And Palmer actually could have had a big game because he was targeted key spots, but didn't happen. But I always will keep looking for these guys. And again, we forget about wide receiver handcuffs and things to look at there. And another rookie got to put on the watch list. We'll see about DK Metcalf. He did return with that hip injury, but just someone to watch. He did get his most usage last week and is a great matchup against the Cardinals this week. Jackson Smith and the Jigba. I've been waiting for him to do something. He's just been way off the radar, just buried here. But Lockett is a little bit older. We'll see what they do with him. Metcalf is hurt, so maybe JSN gets a little bit more action. Rashid Shaheed, again, if you're desperate for a dart throw deep shot guy, it's Shaheed. It seems like he's getting a little bit more run than Michael Thomas. So a couple more to add to your list, Michelle. And I think those are maybe more dart throw options to me.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely with Rashid Shaheed. I mean, you're just hoping for the one big play. That's all. Yeah. That's the only way he gets fantasy points is if he has the one big play. But hey, he can get it. It is a tougher matchup, though, against the Jaguars. So I'm not loving that. And looking at tight ends quickly here, if you're desperate for a tight end and maybe Luke Musgrave's not on your waiver wire, unfortunately, a guy like Dalton Schultz is on a bye, and that would have been a guy that you could have picked up and felt good because 3 straight weeks. And I was telling you not to play him against the Saints last week, and he came through with a touchdown and 61 yards. So apparently, the Saints can stop every tight end except for Dalton Schultz and Cade Otton. Those are 2 tight ends they can just cannot stop. And then I think I don't really know if I would be if I have the guts to play this, but Michael Mayer, he had his coming out game last week, 5 receptions, 75 yards. He gets a nice matchup against the Bears. Would you play Michael Mayer this week, Vinny?
If I was hurting a tight end for sure, it depends on who you've got off here. And look, there's not a lot of tight ends of significance that are off this week, but you might have Jake Ferguson on your team or something like that. And you said, okay, I'm going to take a shot. But what I liked, they just peppered him with targets immediately in that game against the Patriots. They said, okay, we're going to keep getting this guy involved. And really, what's happening, Devontae Adams is not seeing a lot here consistently as the big target volume guy. It's been Jacoby Myers. They pretty much phased out Hunter Renfrow. The other thing that's happened is Michael Mayer is now starting to be the key guy over Austin Hooper. They said, okay, we're finally done with Austin Hooper. They kind of trust him more in this offense now. So I think that role will expand. And the Bears matchup is not that bad, right, this week. So you do a lot worse. And actually, if it's pivots to Brian Hoyer or Aiden O'Connell, it's a security blanket type player. You might not get as many downfield throws to Adams, and that's going to help Mayer and Myers, if you can say that 5 times fast, Mayer and Myers for the Raiders. But that could be a lot of their offense in the passing game going forward. So something to definitely look at there. And again, tight end has been so messy that you basically have to consider anyone that puts up a game like that.
Yeah. So in our last segment here to close out the show, we'll give you some names of guys that you can drop to pick up some of these guys we just talked about. And then 3 of our favorite streaming defenses this week. But first, before we get into all that, we have to talk about another one of our sponsors. This episode is brought to you from Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. I use the Game Time app all of the time. Absolutely love it. I have nothing to say bad about it. I'll probably use them for Astros playoff tickets if they can win a game and get back home here. But snag your tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and you use code locked on for $20 off your first purchase. Again, just create an account and redeem code locked on NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so one guy we were bringing up on this episode last week, Amari DeMarcado for the Cardinals. Drop him, right? I mean, we gave him a shot. He didn't get the work. I don't think he's going to randomly get the work now, right? I don't think you can give him another shot.
Yeah, there's so many running backs like this. I'm starting to feel the same way about Jaleel McLaughlin. Okay, I was somewhat interested in what he could do, and then Javonte Williams comes back quickly, and not surprisingly, Williams, with his job threatened, kind of looked okay against the Chiefs in a tough matchup. So these guys, I mean, even to some degree, I know you're not going to drop Kyren Williams, but just be careful with some of these guys. In the end, there's a reason why these guys were kind of not drafted. You know, if they're a little bit smaller, it's hard to keep up. Even Devin Achant, I mean, I think you'll keep him if you have an IR spot, right? I mean, but just be wary about these guys. That can happen, and they're just not totally sold on him. And they had him play. It's just hard. These teams go all in on a guy for 1 week out of necessity, and then they just totally go 180 away from them. It's hard. And the same thing, Cam Akers, like we was like, okay, this is going to maybe cut to Alexander Madison as he doesn't look as explosive, but Akers has basically done nothing here. So some of these backs, even the Samaje Perine types, I mean, some of these guys can be jettisoned off here, off your rosters pretty quickly. I think you look at Donta Foreman; he didn't really do much there in a starting role. So these short-term rentals, look, don't keep them for long term when things are changing. And I think you look at DeMarcado falls right in that category.
Yeah, Cam Akers. I mean, who would have told you that
Yeah. Yeah.
swapping late round picks and 500 drafts from now wouldn't get you snaps? Yeah. Definitely
Yeah.
Cam Akers. He's just an insurance policy at this point. So if you do have Alexander Madison, you want that insurance policy, fine. I don't obviously I don't know quite what you're saying about Devin A-Chain and Kyren Williams, but don't even consider dropping those guys because they're
IR.
amazing.
Hope we have IR
Fantasy.
spots. That's what you need in your league. So keep that
Yeah.
in mind.
And then
You're
for
not
wide
dropping them. I'm
receiver,
just saying that there's a risk sometimes with those guys.
okay,
And
so the smaller guys.
yeah, I think that's it. Somewhere, I mean, their teams are going to fade them or they're going to get hurt. So something to watch there for sure. But I think you have three receivers that I would agree with you that need to be dumped here that are
Yeah.
absolutely doing nothing.
Yeah, these guys can go. Elijah Moore, Odell Beckham Jr., and Zay Jones. It's not to say they're never going to have a big game this season, but you can't just keep rostering them hoping it's going to happen. And then their one big game, they're probably going to be on your bench anyways. So if you need someone to drop to pick up these guys, don't be scared to drop them. And then with at tight end, Tyler Higbee and Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry started the season really nice and then has completely disappeared.
Yeah.
The Patriots offense is straight trash, garbage. You can't roster him. And Tyler Higbee with Cooper Kupp back. It's just
Yeah.
Kupp and Puka Nacua and nobody else. So Tyler Higbee is a guy that you can't really trust and play anymore either. And I think these are two easy drops this week.
Yeah, Elijah Moore, it must be the thing, right? It seems like if your name is Moore, it's not going to be good. Like Sky Moore hasn't been all that productive, and Rondell has not had a role, and now DJ does not have his quarterback. So maybe it's the curse of the Moores. But Elijah Moore, like the concept of Elijah Moore is more exciting than the execution of Elijah Moore, unfortunately. Like without Deshaun Watson, and looking at PJ Walker and Amari Cooper dominating the targets, it's been brutal for anyone not named Amari Cooper in that passing game. Now, Higbee and Henry, I know similar things are happening with both of them, right? These teams need them in a more blocking role, and they're comfortable with just having them in that role if they need it, right? And for the Rams, it's because they're good at wide receiver. They don't need to extend there to get Higbee involved, right? When you have those three receivers. And with the Patriots, I don't think they know what they're doing. I mean, they're throwing to Pharaoh Brown, they're throwing to Mike Gesicki now at tight end. They're just involving too many guys. It's like the anti-Chiefs. It's like a very bad offense that's spraying the ball around, not giving us any fantasy value with nobody standing out, not even the tight end. So, yeah, I mean, tight end has been that bad where you can dump those. And Michelle, I would even say if David Njoku's not doing all that much, you can
Oh
pivot
no,
away
yeah.
from
He
him.
should already be on your waivers. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
don't roster
like
David
just don't
Njoku.
put these guys in the lineup every week. I mean, like we cut bait on Chigakonkwo early. Just get rid of these guys. Greg Dulcich that we did kicked off our team early when he got hurt. These were fringe guys anyway. Don't worry about the
Yeah.
fringe guys. Much better to go after upside guys such as Musgrave and Mayer if you're looking for help at tight end.
Yeah. Same thing with Luke. Oh my goodness. Jake Ferguson last night didn't do much of anything.
Yeah.
Dak had a great game. CeeDee Lamb had a great game. Brandon Cooks had a great game, but Jake Ferguson wasn't involved. So he's another guy that if you want to move on and grab a younger guy with more upside, do it. And then talking about tight ends here to close out the show quickly. Some good streamer plays. Commanders are out there against the Giants. I don't really care which quarterback starts for the Giants, whether it be Tyrod Taylor, Daniel Jones. It's fine. That's fine by me if I'm playing a defense against them. The Colts against the Browns. Obviously, you would like it a little bit more if PJ Walker starting instead of Deshaun Watson, but I still think they're a viable option with upside either way. And then the Raiders against the Bears without Justin Fields. I mean, the Raiders have been a pretty solid defense, like way better than they were last year. So I think they're a sneaky defense to begin with. And then I can't even tell you the quarterback off the tangent. What's his name? What's the Bears quarterback?
Tyson Badgett. His dad was a pro wrestler. You'll hear that about a lot. And then he went to Shepherd. You'll know that college by the end of this weekend. And I think you could also play the Bears if Aiden O'Connell starts on the other side. That could be really ugly. So,
Sure.
I mean, the Bears defense is terrible, but they got their secondary back. They were actually not bad against the Vikings last week with some of the healthy bodies. So that's going to be an ugly game. Michelle, I did have one question. I looked at the Jaguars. I mean, they had really only one bad game in fantasy, really just unplayable. They were okay against the Bills, didn't have a big game, but they were playable. It was just that Texans game. But otherwise, they've been pretty impactful, making a lot of plays. And I like the fact that they're playing the Saints and Derek Carr this week. So there may be some opportunities there. But I think those are the things you have to look at a little bit. Cleveland was one of these, right? We realized, okay, this is a defense we can play more weeks than not. Jaguars, I think, maybe get into that status. So always look for those plays that you didn't expect we're going to put in maybe even like a Detroit, right? We didn't know what Detroit was going to be viable every week, but if you can latch onto one of those, I think you're in good shape. And you don't have to
Yeah,
play this game the
absolutely.
way
Jaguars would be my favorite pickup out of all these teams if they're out there. But there's some good. I mean, there's some really gross matchups this week, just overall. So
yeah.
there's good when there's gross matchups. There's typically a lot of good streaming defenses.
Yeah, and a lot of backup quarterbacks playing, and that's always helpful.
Yeah.
And again, it could be very similar with the Colts Browns game, Raiders Bears game, just backup quarterbacks galore in these games. So exploit those backup quarterbacks. That's where you get those points if you're rewarded for sacks and takeaways most. So again, don't forget about defense. It still can help you win some games, and it's definitely come through. When I get 15 or 18 points from my defense, I usually win. So it's all good things to consider here. So again, there's our look at the week 7 waiver wire. That means we'll pivot tomorrow, every dayers, to looking at the running back and quarterback rankings for week 7. Yeah, compressed week of names out there. So might be extending to play people that you normally wouldn't. So we'll give you those suggestions there on tomorrow's show. Then we'll look at the wide receivers and tight ends and close with DFS and prize picks there on Friday's show. That's what we do here in Locked On Fantasy Football. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.